Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another Top Cut breakdown video. In yesterday's video, we went over the first place Dark Broly list for this very video, and I mentioned that I wasn't going to do a Top Cut breakdown video because it was only one event, but then I thought to myself, why wouldn't I do that? I always used to do one event breakdown videos when there were only one event to talk about during a weekend, and I figured there's not that many opportunities where, other countries outside of North America get to, really have their events kind of like showcased. So I figured I had the info for this event. I do a video, talk about the different decks in this meta. It's always cool to see how other regions are playing the game, right? So if you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to help support the channel, many ways down in the description to do so, as always. But today, guys, if you're looking to step your game up, maybe compete in events just like this. I mean, in America, we have a few coming up. You may want to check the Patreon down in the description. Not only can you read the articles that I post there, but you can also inquire about coaching if you're interested in that. Anyways, let's get started here. All right, so like I mentioned, the first place deck from this event was Dark Broly. I'll list off the top 8 real quick. We had a first place Dark Broly, a second place Green Broly BR, which for that I do have a profile here on the channel, but I'll talk about that more on the next slide. We have a third place Gogeta Xeno, a fourth place King Piccolo, a fifth place Gogeta Xeno, a sixth place Green Gotenks, a seventh place SS4 Vegeta Ramp, and an eighth place Yellow Trunks. First of all, again, shout out to Wang Po and all those guys who play in the Asian region that always shoot me over this information. I really do appreciate it. You guys are an incredible help for this, as well as, getting your guys' region out there and exposed and all that kind of stuff. I really do appreciate it. But yes, first place Dark Broly. This was a best of one online event, no top cut. So Dark Broly, talked about it yesterday. Not going to spend too much time on it, but I do just want to say, like, this deck's role in the format, it's super rogue. So I mean, this is not going to be like a pillar of the format or anything, but it's very similar to Gogeta Xeno in that it just presents a lot of pressure for very cheap. But Dark Broly does it in a bit of a different way than Gogeta Xeno does, for example, in that your battle cards are a little bigger. You probably have to spend more energy on average than Gogeta Xeno does. Both decks have Overwhelm, but Gogeta Xeno has like a free Unison, for example. Dark Broly, you're pretty much paying for everything in the deck that's not your Overwhelms. But when you do pay for a battle card, I mean, you get big value. Those one-drop 30k battle cards are very cheap and very menacing. They have very good effects as well, like Realm Ravager messing with your opponent's hand, and then you have the other one, Berserker, controlling your opponent's board. And if your opponent is not prepared for a deck like Dark Broly with the appropriate floodgates, this deck can just run you over. I mean, you're not out comboing constant 30k battle cards, so you got to have the proper negates, you got to have the proper floodgates, and you might be playing those cards for other matchups, but if they're battle card floodgates, I mean, Dark Broly has the same answer that Gogeta Xeno has, which is Super Kamehameha. The extra card floodgates are a little tougher to deal with, but as one example, Dark Broly has never really had a problem with green, because, even though your opponent might activate Dormant Potential, you're still getting 2 30k attacks through, and your opponent is probably taking those 2 damage if they don't have like a follow-up blocker or something, right? And that's just one example, and that was more so kind of like a thing when the Dark Brolys were all free, but still like similar concept in this meta, right? But I will say, to Dark Broly's detriment, with red being as popular as it is, I mean, most red decks in my opinion should be playing Violent Rays, and a lot of them are, so that can be a problem for Dark Broly. But I mean, when you come across a matchup that's not red, or if you know how to properly play around Violent Rays, you're going to be in for a good time, right? So pretty cool sleeper pick. I do like it. Pretty interesting that it took first place here. Anyways, moving along though, we have Green Broly BR. This deck just continues to dominate the Asian regional scene, right? Like, they invented this deck. They've been playing it for a long time. I know Wang Po played it at Worlds. A lot of their players have been playing it within that circle. This deck is really cool. I'm honestly a little bit surprised it hasn't caught on yet in the States or in other regions, but I mean, it's not without answers, right? Of course, like yellow and a couple other colors have their own inherent answers to hand control, and then every color can, or every deck rather, can play Deborah Ritual at Hand for the most part. But I do really appreciate that this is like a really innovative take on kind of what Cell Surge was. You don't necessarily have to attack your leader, attack your opponent's leader rather, on the unawakened side. You can gain some passive advantage that way. But you do have to attack your opponent on the awakened side, but by that point you could be attacking unisons, you could be attacking battle cards, still not giving your opponent resources from their life if you don't want to or need to. And you have that kind of inherent way to get your cards like Rebrand, cards like Sand Instincts, whatever drop area centric cards you might be playing, you have inherent ways to get those to the drop area thanks to your leader needing Sparking 7 and then swinging and refueling back to 6 every time. But again, only playing with 6 cards in hand, I mean, Sometimes Cell Surge would play with like a smaller, like 8-ish card hand, but sometimes if they were ripping the Sand Instincts and drawing lots of cards, they could have like 15 cards in hand in some circumstances. So this leader, a lot more capped where hand control probably should be, but it's so cool to see like this aggro leader, you know, taken and used for a completely different shell in terms of this like hand control type of deck. I do have a profile here on the channel from when this deck I think took a first or third place. I can't exactly remember, but one of their more recent events, I think it was their DBS Fest. This deck did very, very well, and I had the profile here from that from a few weeks ago. If you want to check it out, should be a pretty similar list, you know, maybe 1 or 2 changes depending on what they did, but of course those guys can always comment down below if they've ever made you know, significant changes. But anyways, let's move along here. So we have 3rd and 5th place, both Gogeta Xeno. This is the only deck in this top cut that is taking up 2 slots, right? Gogeta Xeno, very standard, very, very used to seeing it, right? Nothing too crazy here. Again, mainly just drawing on those comparisons to Dark Broly. The decks are very similar in that they revolve around the SS4 thwarting engine. That's just the best black engine you could be playing right now. Maybe at least till set 17 comes out, and, you know, warring any potential ban list changes, right? Who knows? I mean, if there are any decks that are going to be looked at going into set 17, I gotta think it's this deck and something in red, most likely King Piccolo. But yeah, I still don't know what they would do to this deck because they hit it in quite a few ways going into set 16, and it's still the best black deck. It's one of the best aggro decks in the current meta. Other black decks you could play, like you wouldn't be looking at aggro, you'd be looking at other play styles like mid-range or control. For control in black, you pretty much only have Hachiak, and that's not been a very popular pick as of late. I do think that would actually be pretty good in this meta because, you know, we're going wide with a lot of battle cards in this format, and Hachiak naturally punishes that. But I think people don't really want to play Hachiak because it's not the most fun thing in the world. Like, you're also limited in your actions, and you're not like yellow control or blue control where you have like really big turn-ending cards in a lot of ways. But I mean, your leader is kind of meant to be that floodgate, right? And then for black mid-range, why would you play anything mid-rangey when you just play Gogeta Xeno, right? If the deck that's faster is just like better and plays better quality cards, you're not going to want to play a mid-range deck in that color, right? Mid-range is kind of in that weird spot where if there's a better control deck or a better aggro deck, you don't really want to be in the middle, right? It's kind of weird. But I think set 17, Toa might shift that up a bit. It might be a pretty good mid-range deck, but I mean, time will tell on that one. But yeah, I kind of went on a tangent here because we talked about Gogeta Xeno to death, and I figured there were some other interesting points to bring up here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. But anyways, let's move on here. Next up, we've got King Piccolo. Again, I mean, beating a dead horse at this point, probably the best deck in format. This is the one red deck I expect them to touch going into set 17. Not because it's like crazy overbearing. I mean, in this format, it kind of is, but I mean, we've had way worse like free play decks in the past, right? And King Piccolo is not even killing you till like turn 4 on average, even considering all the free play it has access to. So with that in mind, I think they will touch it just because it has so much free play, and you know, the devs and whatnot have tried to take a pretty hard stance on free play. So that's the main reason I think King Piccolo is going to get hit, besides the fact that I think it is the best deck in this current format. But even though it is the best deck, it's not like the levels of oppressive that other aggro decks like King Vegeta were, right? Or Storm, even for that example. But yeah, I mean, still incredible, but not overbearing in this meta, so that's pretty interesting to note. Then we have a Gotenks here, a green Gotenks. Okay, so whenever I talk about green, ever since Cell Surge has been hit, I've always mentioned that I think King Cold and Gotenks are the two main like rogue leaders of green. Actually, with the cooler reveals today, that might actually even change going into set 17 as well. That cooler deck looks pretty cool, but that was dumb of me to say. I didn't mean to pun like that. But anyways, getting back on topic, I do think that Gotenks is one of the better road decks for green, and at least in like North America and other regions closer, King Cold's been the only one really putting up results. Green Gotenks has not really topped. I'm not even sure if I've ever talked about Green Gotenks in the set 16 format until now, but I do think it's one of the better decks. Grim Reaper, an insane card. Being able to crack into Cell Xeno is helping you end a lot of games. Again, where the aggro decks are only ending games at like turn 4 on average, turn 5 is super realistic, especially if you know how to play quality defense. And with cards like Dormant and other cards that, you know, help you defend in green, that's very feasible. So having like a Cell Xeno turbo deck where your Cell Xeno food is a super insane battle card, that just seems good to me. Not best color in format or anything, but still pretty solid. Then we have SS4 Ramp. So in my head, this just, I don't have the list for this, but this has to just revolve around Kale Rampaging Demon. But in Best of 1, though, I could totally see the list also revolving around Turning the Tide. Like, Best of 1 is going to be one of those finicky situations where your opponent's probably not going to have the Black Jiren counterplay in their deck. So you can totally get away with, like, Turning the Tide cheese. Like, having Boo Unison and then going to Turning the Tide, your opponent is probably not going to be able to recover from that. But still, I mean, in a best of 3 format, if you were to play SS4 Ramp, which I think is actually still a pretty good deck in best of 3, you probably want to be revolving around Kale Rampaging Demon. No, you're not going to be taking away your opponent's hand, but you're going to wipe every single thing on their board, get a huge beefy 30k double strike dual attacker, and then, you know, you're going to have excess energy open for defense, and blue has great, you know, on hit defense. So pretty good there in my opinion. And the final deck for this event, guys, Yellow Trunks, which has been gaining popularity, took its first W a few weeks ago. I don't expect this deck to go anywhere. I also don't think it's going to be considered for the chopping block going into set 17. I don't think Yellow's at that point currently. I mean, Yellow took some big hits on the last ban list, which definitely leveled out its strength level. It's definitely a good color, but it's not overbearing or anything like that. You know, you'll see one Trunks, maybe one Sin top here and there, and I think that's totally fine as far as power levels go. But that's going to cover this meta, guys. You know, definitely some things we're used to seeing: King Piccolo, Trunks, Gogeta Xeno, but some cool outliers like Gotenks, like SS4 Ramp, like Dark Broly taking first. It is very, very cool. Yes, best of 1 does contribute. Sometimes some cheesier strategies are able to win and do better because of best of 1, but it's still interesting to look at and see how other regions are playing the game. But anyways, guys, let me in the comments below what you think about this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.